I've got an interesting story we're going to be focusing on today, and that has to do with the Defense Department that had demanded back bonus money that they had given to recruit soldiers a few years ago. And these veterans, and some of them are still in the military, I suppose, they were demanded to pay back what the Defense Department had given them as bonuses to sign up. This was the California National Guard people we're talking about here. So I'd like to read a bit for you from the MSN.com website, in which they quote the LA Times on this story. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter on Wednesday ordered the Pentagon to suspend efforts to claw back enlistment bonuses improperly given to thousands of California National Guard members during the height of the Iraq War. Carter's order follows a Los Angeles Times report Saturday that said the Pentagon was demanding repayments from about 9,700 California Guard members who had received enlistment bonuses, student loans, or other payments, mostly between 2006 and 2008. Soldiers argued that it was unfair to demand repayment of enlistment bonuses and tuition assistance of $15,000 or more when the only mistake was to take financial incentives that recruiters offered. Many served multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and some were badly wounded. The Pentagon demands for reimbursement sparked widespread public outrage, especially since the California Guard insisted it had warned members of Congress about the problem in 2014. On Tuesday, President Barack Obama ordered the Pentagon to expedite its review of the overpayments. In a statement, Defense Secretary Carter said he had ordered the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, that's called DFAS for short, the Pentagon agency responsible for collecting the repayments, to, in quotes, suspend all efforts to collect reimbursements from affected California National Guard members, effective as soon as it is practical, end of quote. Now, the DFAS came up a few years ago as well, and I've written about it in my book, Dollar Democracy, in the chapter 8, called The Pentagon, Waste, Fraud, and Abuse. And we're looking at how much waste there is in the military in not only just purchasing weapons that sometimes don't work or are overpriced and overcharged for by the defense contractors, but also not being able to keep track of the money coming in and leaving, coming from Congress, going to the Pentagon and leaving the Pentagon for expenditures such as pay. The Defense Finance and Accounting Service, DFAS, is also the arm that is responsible for paying our veterans regularly with their paychecks and the correct amount. Now, what happened was, not only is this going on today, becoming a big news item, but what has happened is that just a few years ago, back in 2011, a veteran that I'm writing about in chapter 8 of my book, Sean Aiken, I'd like to read about him, let you know about him. Sean Aiken was a victim of the same DFAS, Defense Finance and Accounting Service, that has not been keeping track of our money carefully or paying the soldiers at times on time or the right amount. Here you go. For example, after 2 tours of combat duty left him with traumatic brain injury, severe PTSD, chronic pain, and a hip injury, U.S. Army medic Sean Aiken was shocked when he received his October 2011 paycheck for only $2,337 instead of his regular monthly take-home pay of $3,300. For December, his pay dropped to $118. Because of a lack of help or answers from the staff, Aiken and his young family went through hell and back to survive, going to church-run food pantries, borrowing money for rent, and even pawning their jewelry, games, iPhone, and his medic bag, which he had used to save lives in Afghanistan. The real outrage is that the money the military had taken from Aiken's paychecks was a result of, in quote, accounting and other errors, and it should have been his to keep, end of quote. This is from Reuters News Agency, July 10, 2013. The Pentagon agency in charge of accurately paying America's 2.7 million active duty and reserve soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen is the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, DFAS, headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. It has approximately 12,000 employees and a $1.3 billion annual budget. DFAS often fails to pay our women and men in uniform accurately, according to a Reuters special report of July 9, 2013 by Scott Paltrow and Kelly Carr. The report reviewed individuals' military pay records, government reports, and other documents. The investigators also interviewed, in quote, dozens of current and former soldiers and other military personnel, end of quote, and found that Aiken's case was not the only one. Errors in pay in the military are widespread. As quoted earlier, Democratic Senator Thomas Carper of Delaware, chairman of the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, said, in quote, too often, A soldier who has a problem with his or her pay can wait days, weeks, or even months to get the thing sorted out. This is simply unacceptable. End of quote. I'm asking in my book, if this is simply unacceptable, then why doesn't Congress, the President, and the Pentagon fix this problem immediately? Is it because our all volunteer military recruits come primarily from working middle class and working poor families? According to the Rand Corporation, these American families cannot afford well-paid lobbyists and large campaign contributions to influence members of Congress and the U.S. President. Do many of our men and women in uniform suffer the stress of inaccurate paychecks because powerful members of Congress pay more attention to their wealthy donors such as defense contractors and other corporate lobbyists? So these are the questions that have to be raised. Someone is calling. Let me just pick it up for a second and we'll go right back to the discussion. Yes, good evening. Peter Mathews here. Who's calling, please?
My name is Joe.
Joe?
Yeah.
Yes, how are you doing? Are you calling on the show to talk about something?
Yeah, I'm one of the students.
Oh, very good. Joe, hang on a second. I want to put you on hold for a bit. In fact, do me a favor, Joe. We're going to continue with this for about 5 more minutes. I'm going to have a veteran come back on and talk about this for a few minutes, and then we'll open the lines up to you and everyone else in the public to call back, okay?
All right.
If you call back about 7:20 if you can, Joe. Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You want me to stay on the line now?
No, I'll go ahead and have you call back if you don't mind.
Okay.
Or if you want to stay, I
7:20?
think it'd be better to call back at 7:20, okay?
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you, Joe. Bye-bye. Okay, so this is in my book, Dollar Democracy with Liberty and Justice for Some, How to Reclaim the American Dream for All. And the chapter is Pentagon Waste, Fraud, and Abuse. And there are examples of millions, if not sometimes even billions of dollars in expenditures, much of which or some of which is not accounted for. And that's because the Defense Department is the only government agency which does not have a comprehensive uniform accounting system that is based on a unified computer system with technology and software that is uniform across the board, that is comprehensive, and can keep track of every single dollar that Congress and the taxpayers is providing to the Pentagon in order to buy weapons and pay our soldiers on time. And many other people who are in the leadership of the military said, and I've got some quotes from the actual generals who said that, and admirals, this can be a situation where it affects our military men and women's morale, fighting men and women's morale, when they're too occupied with where their checks are going to come from next, if it's going to be a full paycheck or not. Just as Sean Aiken was very concerned. Sean Aiken's tremendous story of a man who served the country 2 tours of duty, severely injured, hip injuries, traumatic injuries. He had PTSD, and he was getting treated for health care in the mental health area of life, and yet he could not get his paycheck. He could not get his paycheck on time with the amount, full amount. He only got a partial paycheck and finally dropped down to $113, $118 in December, the month of Christmas, Hanukkah, and other religious holidays. And his kids had to actually go to, amazingly, to social service agencies to get 1 toy for Christmas. He and his wife had to go to food pantries. This is unacceptable. It's happening today with many veterans who they don't get paid on time or the full amount. They're having to wait for a lot of things, and this is just wrong. And if Congress says, Senator Carper said it was unacceptable, why hasn't this been fixed? I wrote about this a year ago, and today the same thing is happening with the National Guard in California, the military women and men who suffered this demand from the Pentagon to pay back bonuses that they were given when they signed up. The bonuses were approved officially to be paid out to the people who are signing up to go into the National Guard, because we needed soldiers back then, even more than what we had. We needed more. And so the bonuses were paid out, and now they're being demanded back and said that it's overpayment. Well, whose fault is it that it's overpayment to our soldiers, sailors and women in uniform and men in uniform? This is not right. And we got to get on top of this. Congress is responsible for this. They should have been on top of this from the beginning. There's the House Armed Services Committee in the House, and there are the Senate committees dealing with the armed services, and they should be on top of this. And don't forget the Senate Budget Committee and the House Appropriations Committee dealing with the expenditures. There are many committees. And what about the Pentagon itself, who's supposed to be on top of this? And if you think about it, the people in our uniforms, in their uniforms of our country, are the most valuable people who can help us defend the country against any kind of invasion or threat of invasion and keep ourselves secure here. And we should not use them in this way, and we should not be sending them off to unjust wars or unnecessary wars, as the case of the war in Iraq was, according to many people, including myself, I believe it was a war that was not needed. It was based on half-truths or inaccurate information or outright misstatements about weapons of mass destruction, about the connection to terror with bin Laden. Those things were not proven. And we don't have to look too far to know that we, the people, have to keep track of information. We have to keep track of the accuracy of the information that our government is giving us. And don't just swallow it hook, line, and sinker just because the government official is saying it and because the corporate media is reporting it exactly the way they say it. We need to become critical thinkers, ladies and gentlemen. As citizens of a country, critical thinking is absolutely necessary and demanded of us as citizens who must keep in touch with the issues, keep track of them, and make sure we're making the right decisions, that our government is making the right decisions about these issues. So let's go back to the issue of our Defense Department, our women and men in uniform, and how they're treated. And I'm going to put on a veteran who is going to be on the phone with us talking about how he was treated as a soldier and as a veteran. And his name is Frank Dawuji. I'm going to go ahead and ring his number right now and get him on here so he can talk to us about some of this, including his own personal experiences regarding being in the military and being a veteran. He's also a university graduate with a master's degree in political science. He'll tell you more about himself, and we should be hearing from Frank Dawuji in just a second. We'll see if Frank comes on. Hello, Frank.
Yes, how's it going?
Yes, good. This is Peter Mathews. We agreed to interview you for this episode, which is going to be covering the veterans issues, particularly what's been going on with the demand for bonuses to be paid back to those soldiers who signed up in the National Guard. The Pentagon has asked them to give the money back. They're saying they were overpaid. I explained to the public about the inaccuracies of the accounting system in our DFAS, Defense, Finance, and Accounting Agents Service that takes care of paychecks. So I want to hear from you on a human level, Frank. How did you find being in the military, and also how did you find being a veteran, and how were you treated afterwards and during that time? And what do you think of what's going on right now?
No, I was treated really well when I was in the Army. And I'm getting treatment at VA right now, and they're doing a great job of taking care of my health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is not a good thing what they're doing, because this is going to discourage people who want to join the Army and say, we don't want to join an organization or a place where this kind of stuff can happen. What is somebody supposed to do after they spend the money? How are they going to come up with $20,000?
Yes, 15 to 20,000. This is a lot of money for them to come up with. And the government, or at least the Pentagon, is saying that the reason they're asking for the money back is that these men and women were overpaid the bonuses. They were paid too much of a bonus. What do you think about that? How did that ever happen?
Well, see, it's a mistake on their part. If it is a mistake on their part, they should take the responsibility, and they should absorb it. We got so many corruption and overcharges by the defense industry. You're looking at only about $20 million, $21 million is nothing. It's a drop in a bucket. But you're causing a lot of emotional problems for the soldiers that are there right now, making them feel like they're criminals. They did something wrong. Okay?
And it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault.
Correct. And what about the people who took the money from the National Guard, went to Iraq or Afghanistan, and died over there?
Yes.
They gave their life for that $20,000 bonus. Remember, at the time when they were re-enlisting, things were really bad. You don't know whether you're going to live or die every time you go over there.
That's right. And the government needed more soldiers. That's why they paid the bonuses out in the first place. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, they got what they wanted. Now they're saying, well, the people don't qualify for it. Whether you are sent as a frontline soldier or somebody in the supply chain working in the back, you're still in a danger zone. You could be shot by the terrorists.
That's right. That's right.
So you're not really safe anywhere in war zones.
And also the way I look at it from outside, I look at it that when a person in America signs up to serve this country in the military, they're basically giving up their life chances. They're giving up their private life. They're now a public servant completely in the highest sense of the word, that their lives are on the line, literally, and they're willing to sacrifice it if need be. So that's a huge commitment, whether or not they go to war. they've signed on that dotted line to give up their life for the country if need be. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah, because when you sign up for the military,
yes,
you know that you can die, and why would somebody want to do that if they can make a lot of money in the private sector? They might as well stay home like everybody else, like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Who got deferments
Donald Trump got many deferments, didn't he? Several deferments to stay out of the Vietnam
Correct.
War. Yes, and
Correct.
being out of the military.
He made billions of dollars by not going anywhere and doing his duty as a American citizen.
Yes.
You know.
And speaking of that era, I was from the same era as Trump. I'm a little bit younger than him, but I was also eligible for the draft because we had a draft army at the time, and I was in Texas doing my university, but I was completely eligible because they drew a lottery of our birth dates. According to when our birthday was drawn out of the hat, would determine whether or not we'd be the most eligible to be drafted or the least eligible. There were 365 days in the year, so my birthday was on a birthday that fell 125 ranking. So if people had a birthday that fell out of the first draw or the second or the 10th draw, they were just about sure to be drafted. So apparently there were enough draftees in my area to had birthdays below 125, so I wasn't called. But I was there ready to go. I was ready to be drafted if I had to be, and I was someone who was, just like a lot of other millions of young men, were in this condition, and this is something that we should never, in this case with a voluntary army, to get away from a draft system, we instituted the voluntary army, and that's when these men and women got bonuses to sign up, to give them, some kind of reward for actually putting their lives on the line. And this has happened to them, and now the government's trying to take, when I say the government, it's not the whole government, it's the part of the government. The Pentagon is demanding back the money, bonuses, saying they were overpaid. They're demanding back part of the bonus. And this is unconscionable. Now, which part of our government is actually responsible politically in terms of a governmental responsibility? It's not just the Pentagon, which is a bureaucracy under the president, under the executive branch, but the Congress and the president are responsible for this, aren't they?
Correct. Yeah, so now the president and Congress should get together and forgive this debacle and say we're going to write it off.
Yeah.
Actually, the reality is it's coming out of the taxpayers. We are the taxpayers, and we should be able to say it's okay.
Yes.
We give some of these men and women who, this is the problem because the Defense Department categorized certain jobs as hazardous, and they were paying bonuses.
Mm-hmm.
But I see every person that goes overseas in the war zone deserve bonus.
Yes.
I mean, their lives are in danger.
That's right. So that's another important point. And if only we would treat our military women and men as well as we treated the weapons that the Pentagon buys with taxpayer dollars, and sometimes buys weapons that don't even work that well. Look at the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter airplane, which has had all kinds of problems according to the RAND Corporation. This plane now is costing on the average of $200 million per plane. And that plane was contracted with Lockheed Martin initially for $69 million per plane. And yet the costs kept going up, and the government just pays out the money. And yet when it comes to our young men and women in uniform who are about to go to war and have been called on the call of duty, then they got a bonus to do it. And that was a legitimate thing. They felt this was a bonus that they earned. And it so happens that the Pentagon didn't keep track of the money and gave them too much, in some cases, of the bonus. That's not their fault. So we need to treat our women and men. This is our human resource. These are fellow human beings that should be treated really well, and you're going to affect the morale of the fighting force if you treat them like this. And the other people you mentioned yourself, other people will look at this and say, what kind of incentive is this for us to go into the military if we're going to be treated this way?
Exactly. So now, I think the President of the United States and the Congress should get together in the next couple of days and pass a legislation saying that we forgive these.
Yes. And I believe there are a couple of...
And that's it. Move on.
There you go. And there are a couple of Congress people that are working on that, I believe, but they need to move on it really quickly and get this, under control. And I mentioned that there were other incidents earlier, a few years ago, when someone like Sean Aiken, the gentleman who was a soldier he had served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and he was injured. You probably heard on the show. Were you watching the show a little bit earlier?
Yes.
Okay, so you heard me talk a bit about Sean Aiken and read from my book about him. So this is something we really got to talk about. Let's go ahead and open the phone lines up. We have some people I think that want to call in. Let's see if they do. I'll go ahead and turn on the phone because there was just one person who called in earlier. Let's see, he'll be calling in at 7:20, so we're almost there. But Frank, tell me something. When you were in the military, how were you treated? When you were actually an active duty
Well, we
soldier?
would, once the basic training was over,
Yes.
you were treated pretty well. I was in the helicopter mechanic school where we were treated with respect, and
Okay.
the educational system that they set up to teach people how to fix helicopters
Mm-hmm.
was pretty advanced at the time. I mean, they did a good job of that. Once we came out of the school, and I was assigned to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
But we were treated pretty well. I think.
And
it
you
was
earned
like a
you
normal-
earned the GI Bill, right, to go to college?
Yeah, I got a GI Bill after I came out of the Army. They paid me $300 a month, which wasn't a lot of money, but enough to live with my parents so I could go to community college and got my AA degrees there.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my UCLA, I was able to get some, continue with the GI Bill.
And what year was that, Frank, when you came out of the military and you got the GI Bill for the first time and went to college?
So,
What year?
1978.
1978. Now, I understand
77.
that GI Bill. Let me just. There's a phone call coming in. 1 second. Let's see who this is, and they want to talk. They want to talk to you, Frank. Good evening. You're on with Peter Mathews. How are you
Yeah,
doing?
Peter, how you doing? It's Joe.
Oh, okay. Good to hear from you again. Would you like to talk about this issue that we've been? Have you been watching the live stream, the show?
Yeah, the chapter 8 in the book.
Have you been watching the show about this topic we've been talking about, the bonuses that are being demanded back by the
Yeah.
Pentagon?
That's ridiculous.
Yes, you heard about that, right?
Yeah, let them keep the money.
Are you a veteran?
Unfortunately, no.
But you still
No,
you still
I
feel
was
empathy.
I was the last year that had to register for the draft.
Okay. Oh, same thing. Okay. Frank, are you still on there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Joe says they let him keep the money. This is ridiculous. I think most Americans feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. It's not their money. It's our money.
It's the taxpayer money,
You know?
right, Joe? It's your money and my money. We pay the taxes for this.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So
It doesn't
why
belong
would
to the Army. It doesn't belong to the President or Congress.
here's my
Enough with this shenanigan stuff,
yes, as I read from the report on the LA Times, they mentioned that Congress was alerted of this back in 2014, I believe, from what I saw. 2014. Why hasn't members of Congress been on top of this and fixed this problem earlier? Here we go.
Well, then I'm even stronger on my stance. And you know what? Screw Congress. Let them keep the money.
Yeah, but that's the thing. They should let them keep the money, but the Pentagon has demanded the money back. Here we go. Look at this. The Pentagon demands for reimbursement sparked widespread public outrage, especially since the California Guard insisted it had warned members of Congress about the problem in 2014. This is 2 years later. It took 2 years to fix this problem? What's going on here with our government?
Yeah.
What do you think, Joe? What do you think about that?
Too bad, Congress.
Well,
Because,
yeah.
because we veterans don't donate to their campaigns. That's why.
Oh, so there may be something here about pay to play, or at least the campaign donations, which have an influence on who Congress tends to listen to more often. Not all the time, but more often than those who don't come out and donate to their campaigns or lobby them between elections. You're telling me there's some effect of money in politics in America, Joe and Frank?
Oh, no,
I
don't
believe so.
Of course not.
I think you're being a little tongue-in-cheek, a little sarcastic there, but so you think so?
Oh, yeah, it exists.
Yeah.
Big time.
So what else is on your mind, Joe? We got Frank here, the veteran. A friend of mine, I asked him to be on the show.
Your chapter in the book on the defense budget.
Oh, chapter 8 in my book.
Yeah, I agree. We spend way too much on defense on a bunch of stupid programs like the F-35, which, I was an aerospace worker.
Uh-huh.
That thing was a flop from the get-go.
Oh, so you've been tracking it from a long time ago when you were
They
working.
scrapped the program a long time ago and just
Aerospace.
upgraded everything else.
Right. Did you work for
Yeah.
Lockheed Martin, Joe?
Pardon?
Did you work for Lockheed Martin or a different company?
No, I worked on the space side for
Okay.
Boeing, for NASA.
For Boeing, right. So you've seen with Lockheed Martin, there was really a lot of shenanigans going on in the sense, legally, by the way. That's legal what they did. They gave a lot of money to members of Congress, including the F-35 Joint Caucus, the caucus in Congress, whose main purpose is to get money for the F-35. There are Congress members who belong to a caucus. It's called the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter Caucus. And they get a lot of money from Lockheed Martin
Let's go buy a piece of junk.
for their campaigns. And that plane doesn't, the Iran Corporation, after studying it carefully and simulating warfare with China, it said this plane cannot turn, it cannot climb, and it cannot fly. And yet that plane has been grounded several times for catching on fire. The single engine doesn't work, that much thrust. There's not enough thrust for a fighter jet with a single engine. They're asking you to do a 3-in-1 function. 3 different things in one airplane. Doesn't work very well.
No, I mean, I listen to the pilots. When the pilot refuses to fly a plane, something's wrong.
Oh, yes, indeed. Some pilots have complained about that plane.
But something I wanted to bring up, okay, if they cancel, like the F-35, that puts a lot of people out of work. Is the government going to bail those aerospace workers out like it did the auto workers?
Good point.
They worried about 80,000 auto workers. They better start worrying about 800,000 defense contractor workers.
Absolutely, good point. And you know what should be done?
Not just the prime contractors, but the little subcontractors, the little machine shops who make one part.
That's right.
Eventually winds up down the line in a Rolls-Royce engine.
Yes. They'll lose their jobs as well in some cases. So what I would suggest, and I've always called this a method of using a type of industrial policy, where the government actually needs to retrain some of these workers, or all of them who are going to be laid off, if there's a cutback in production of a plane that's not working, retrain them to build some of the products that we could export and use for our own economy. For example, someone who builds a sophisticated airplane, a fighter plane, could also be trained, with not too much extra retraining, but they could retrain to build a high-speed train that goes 200 miles an hour, or a maglev train that goes 350 miles an hour, like the Germans do and the Chinese do. Am I right?
Yeah.
And put them to work, and also give them some transition paychecks while they're getting retrained. I mean, we squander so much money on wasteful wars and corporate loopholes. That money could be brought in to help these defense workers to retrain and adjust and keep their lives on track and build great products that we could export to other countries.
Not just the defense contract workers that are getting laid off, but for every one of those people, there's somewhere between 6 and 8 people in the surrounding community to help support them. McDonald's workers, grocery store workers.
That's right. Coffee shops.
They lose their jobs too.
Yes, that's right. There's a spin-off effect there. And that's why we have hidden unemployment that's twice the rate right now of the official unemployment of 5%. If you look at the hidden unemployment together with the part-time workers, it's over 10%, maybe closer to 17%.
Yeah.
So we got to work on those things. What do you think, Frank? What do you think what Joe's saying?
Oh, absolutely. Huh?
Very good. Okay, let's continue here. You have any questions for Frank, Joe?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks for calling in then. Appreciate it. We'll have to take a couple more calls. Okay, take care now. Bye-bye. Okay, we're back, Frank. So what do you think of that? Whose responsibility is to help retrain some of these defense contractor workers who have been important in the Cold War? They've been important to build the weapons that this country needs. So what happens when these weapons are not needed anymore, are not working, and they get laid off?
Well, it's our society's responsibility, which means that the government should make sure that people are retrained, so they have jobs, so they're producing and they're helping the society.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
They're not angry at themselves and the government and the people. And look at so much anger is coming from a lot of the Donald Trump's voters.
Absolutely, exactly true. That's right. Many of these folks who are voting for Trump are so angry with the system for failing them, with the corporations for laying them off and outsourcing their jobs, and the government not helping them get retrained or creating new jobs for them or giving incentives to business to do that. It's got to be an active, proactive government that helps our people, because that's what the Constitution says. Am I right, Frank?
Exactly.
It says we the people establish this government to do many things, but also to promote the general welfare, the general well-being of our people. And the government's not doing that right now like it should, at least not as much as it should. And I think we can go back to the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when this president used that preamble of the Constitution as the foundation for launching his New Deal, where the government took an active role, even in hiring people directly to build infrastructure, and also providing incentives for businesses to get moving and have a fair profit, as he said in his Economic Bill of Rights. A lot of things going on today that we could learn from the past, and the right things, not what Donald Trump is saying, which is not looking toward the best of the past, but some of the worst of the past. Let me call. There's another phone call coming in, Frank. 1 second, please. It might be from you. Yes, you're good. Good evening. You're in with Peter Mathews' Social Justice Now program. Who's calling, please? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, good evening. Looks like we lost him, Frank. Hopefully they'll call back again. Please call, if you made that phone call, please call back again, and this time I think we'll be able to pick you up with no problem. So it's great to talk to everyone. It's almost 7:30, but any last words, Frank, about any of these issues that we've been talking about, or even about the election?
We should be outraged about this, trying to get the money, $21 million. It's nothing, because if a defense contractor calls and says, we're going to be over his budget by $21 million, Defense Department is not going to care. No,
the government writes a check right away for that weapon, whether it works properly or not. They write the check right away as soon as the defense contractor demands more money. Let me tell you something. On this last budget, 2015 budget, President Obama and Congress voted for $1 billion more to buy more F-35 Joint Strike Fighters, to buy more of them when they were so poorly performing. So that's another $1 billion thrown away on that. And here we are, we can't even bring in a few million to forgive the bonuses which these folks really deserve.
Yeah. Are soldiers still serving us? And when you're a soldier, you don't get paid a lot. People think that they make a lot less than the ordinary citizens out in the private sector.
Yes,
so they're not getting ahead. They're not living a lap of luxury.
It's a real sacrifice for the country.
Yeah, exactly. Huh?
So I think that hopefully this program will help get the word out, and the more of you who saw this program, or if you have friends that could watch it on YouTube, please go to Peter Mathews 11. Mathews is spelled with one T. Peter Mathews, Mathews 11. That's the YouTube channel where you can get live streaming, and you can also watch this on that channel after the show is over. Meantime, till tomorrow, when you able to come in tomorrow and make some phone calls to us again, and let's have a further discussion about the critical issues of today that are taking place in this momentous time. Less than 2 weeks left for the presidential election, which will have a major impact on our country's future. So please call in tomorrow from 7:15 to 7:30. The show will begin at 7 o'clock in the evening. And until then, we'll say good night. Thank you, Frank, for being here with us.
All right, good night.
Good night, everyone.